Hello and welcome to this video where I will cover the in-game loot systems in World of Warcraft Classic. So there's 5 different loot systems. They are 1. Free-for-all, 2. Round-robin, 3. Master Looter, 4. Group Loot, and 5. Need Before Greed. And these 5 options are the same for both a party and for a raid. There's no difference. And the group leader, either the party leader, if it's a party, or the raid leader, if it's a raid, is the only member who can set or change the loot options for the group. So a couple notes for things that apply to all the different loot settings, all 5 different loot settings. So the money on the corpse from the kill is distributed as evenly as possible among all the party or raid members. The group leader may set an item quality threshold. So any item that's below this threshold, and the threshold is set by the rarity of the item, are handled in a round-robin way. And this prevents people from wasting time rolling for vendor trash, or vendor trash being low-value items. So by default, this threshold is set to be uncommon, which is green, which means that any items of green or uncommon rarity or higher will be rolled for. While in raids, it's common to raise the threshold to rare, which is blue, or epic, which is purple, and that's because the value of uncommon items or lower is typically very insignificant for players who are anyway sufficiently geared and skilled to do the raids. Quest loot is on a separate loot distribution, and there are 2 different modes for quest loot. So one is where you have to collect a specific item from a mob. The typical example there is to collect the head of a certain named mob. And then in that case, regardless of the loot setting, the mob will be lootable by every party member or raid member, every group member who has the quest and that doesn't already have that object currently looted. Yeah. So each member may loot the quest item of the corpse in that situation, and then all the other loot on the corpse will be subject to the group loot settings. But the quest item, everyone will be able to get. The second one for quest loot is when you're collecting certain items, which are quest items. So these quest items will drop on some mobs and they'll be looted in the normal way. But the exception is that if the current looter can't collect the items, either because they don't have the quest or they already have looted all the items required to complete that quest, then the quest loot becomes free for all. So anyone else any other member who has the same quest and has not yet looted all the items required to complete the quest will be able to loot those items. So that would only apply if the person didn't have the quest or if they already have all the items to complete the quest. And then the other items on the corpse are just covered by the group loot setting. Okay, so let's talk about free for all. So free for all means that loot permissions for each mob that dies are given to every party raid member simultaneously. And the loot threshold is ignored for this method. So there's no loot. You can't set a loot threshold that will cause a roll for an item. So it means it's first come, first serve. Whoever is closest and is fastest to loot the kill will be able to get everything of that. The common applicable situations for when you want to use free for all is when you're assisting someone and you want them to be able to loot everything. Secondly, if the entire party is not in the same area, so you may be close enough, like the party members may be close enough to each other that they can still get the kills made by other members, but they're too far away for it to be practical to go over and loot. And so if you set it to free for all, you can have different players relatively close, but still basically playing independently, and they'll be able to loot the mobs that they kill themselves. And it also avoids having a bunch of meaningless roll prompts for example, depending on threshold, typically uncommon items, that will pop up, and you roll for it, but you're anyway the only one that can loot it because you're the only one that's close enough to loot the item. And then lastly, you would typically consider using free for all if it's very unlikely that a valuable item will drop, and you just want to make looting easier and faster for everyone. Now, round robin is when the loot permission for each mob that dies is given to a single person in the group, and that changes in a continuous circular order. So, to say that in a different way, the group members will take turns in looting corpses. So, the loot or the kills are assigned one by one through the entire group. And so, although it may appear to be a fair system on the surface, if you have a dishonest player that's deciding basically what mobs to pull, you may have a situation in which um, that kill order is being manipulated, so that certain players will get the mobs that are likely to drop better loot. So, for an example, with round robin, when let's say you start from scratch with a new party, you have set up round robin as a loot system. So you kill the first mob, then the member one in that group will get the loot permission and get all the loot for that. And then we kill another mob, then the second member will get it, and then so on and so on. And then let's say you have 5 members in the group. So once every member has gotten the loot from one kill, then it starts all over again. And so from mob number 6, it's back to member number 1. And then it just continues going in a circular order like that. Okay, so now Master Looter. So Master Looter means that the loot permissions for each mob that dies is given to a single group member. And so this member is assigned by the group leader, but he could also be the group leader, which when you change the loot system to Master Looter, the group leader is set as the Master Looter by default. But it could be changed. The group leader may set an item quality threshold, and any items below this threshold are handled in a round robin way. So this is typically done to avoid the master looter filling their bag space with low value items. By default, this threshold is set to be uncommon, which is green, and in raids endgame content, it's common to raise the threshold to rare, which is blue, or epic, which is purple, just because the value of uncommon items is typically very insignificant to players who are sufficiently geared and skilled enough to do raid the endgame content. Master Looter has the potential to cause the most friction and or drama in groups, and that's because it gives the Master Looter a lot of power, and with power comes the potential to abuse that power. Now, in general, members will not want to participate in a group with a master looter, using a master looter system, unless they trust both the group leader and the master looter. So, in some cases, that's the same person, right? The group leader is also set themselves up to be the master looter, but it could also be another person, and the people in the group will need to have a level of trust for both individuals to feel comfortable participating. The most effective method to reduce friction and drama when using Master Looter is to be transparent and predictable in the loot distribution. And over the years, players have developed numerous different loot systems for determining loot distribution when using the Master Looter. Some popular examples include need roll, open roll, main spec, which is abbreviated MS, over off spec, which is abbreviated OS, soft reserve, abbreviated to SR, hard reserve, abbreviated to HR, dragon kill points, abbreviated to DKP, and gold dragon kill points, abbreviated to GDKP. But these are all, not in-game loot systems. They've been developed outside of the game itself, and then these groups are using the master looter um, to distribute the loot according to their preferred loot system. Okay, so next, group loot. So group loot is like round robin, except that there's a threshold, which is set by the item rarity, which is set by the leader for which items must be rolled for. As a reminder, round robin means that the loot permissions for each mob that dies is given to a single group member, and that changes in a continuous circular order through the entire group. Group loot is commonly used because it's a reasonable compromise based on a generally deserved lack of trust for other players, when you're playing with strangers, that is. And it's a baseline attempt at fairness at best. It's also the in-game default setting for all groups outside random dungeons. So if you're just partying up with a random group in-game and you just join a party, the group loot is going to be the default loot setting. 5, need before greed. So in this loot system, um, pass is automatically selected for the group members who can't use an item. So if you're in a group and you have this loot system active and there's an item that drops, let's say you are a priest, you cannot use plate, but there's an item that drops that's plate, you will not be given the opportunity to roll for that item because you cannot equip it. And so you automatically pass, and then whoever can wear plate in this case will be given the opportunity to roll for that item. So this system can be unpopular with members for a couple of reasons. One would be just because you can equip an item doesn't mean you actually need it. Maybe no one needs it and it should be disenchanted, and that should go to whoever wins a roll. And also, just because you can't equip an item doesn't mean that you don't have a legitimate secondary claim to that item. You may want to use it for an alternative character, which is usually called an alt, or maybe for disenchanting, or you want to put it to the auction house to sell it. So there's other reasons why you might want to have your chance at rolling for an item that drops. So yeah, this is definitely a situation that can cause some friction. And I haven't personally seen many people use Need Before Greed. Okay, so loot systems other than those that are in-game by default. So as mentioned on the Master Looter slide, over the years, players have developed numerous different loot systems for determining how to distribute the loot. And what all these systems use the Master Looter loot system in the game, and then they have their own preferred way of handling who gets what. Typically, that's done through like a website or on through Discord or maybe a spreadsheet. And so there are many different ways of doing that, but basically each group will set up their own system, and that's the system that the master looter is using when determining who gets what when it's dropping. That concludes this slideshow. Just covered the different in-game loot systems in World of Warcraft Classic, and also briefly mentioned the other systems that people have developed over the years that are outside of the default in-game settings. Thank you.